ESPN's College Game Day is the biggest college football pregame show on TV. And to predict the narrative of the season coming up, we're going to try and predict where game day is going every single week of the 2026 college football season. And it's harder than just looking at the schedule and picking the biggest game, right? Because that's not always how game day works. You got television rights involved. You got storylines. You got rankings. You got rivalries. You got campuses that haven't hosted game day in forever. And you've also got the fact that ESPN generally doesn't want to keep going back to the same three places over and over again, right? Now, they will repeat a campus if the game's big enough. Last year we saw Oregon host game day twice, right? Indiana at Oregon, that was in October, and then they had USC at Oregon in November. So it's not a hard rule, but it does matter. And the other things we got to remember in 2026 is ESPN owns the entire SEC package. They do not own any of the Big Ten package. Now, that doesn't mean that game day won't go to a Big Ten game. They obviously will. They did it, 5 times last year? But if you've got two relatively equal choices, and one is a huge SEC game that ESPN is televising, while the other is a Big Ten game that's going to be on Fox or CBS or NBC, I think the SEC game has an advantage. So that's going to be the methodology. Like we're looking at preseason rankings, we're looking at schedules, recent game day locations, television relationships, potential rankings when the games actually happen, and perhaps most importantly, which game gives ESPN the best story that particular Saturday. So let's go ahead and get started. Now we'll go ahead and say this. There is no game day in week 0, by the way. This is Winning Cures Everything. It's a college football podcast. I'm your host, Gary Seegers, at GaryWCE on all the different socials. Most active on X. I post some stuff on TikTok. You can find us Winning Cures Everything. Maybe it's Winning Cures Everything on TikTok. Just look for Winning Cures Everything on your socials. But Gary WCE is my one on X and Instagram. I swear one of these days I'm going to get this stuff lined up correctly. But anyway, there's not going to be a game day in week 0. There are games on August 29th, on that Saturday. I mean, you got NC State and Virginia. You got TCU, North Carolina, Memphis, UNLV. But they're not doing that. They're not going to do a week 0 game, and I get it. They are going to do week 1. So we'll get to the first real Saturday, but let's go ahead and pull up the graphic for the best games of week 1. And week 1's easy because we already know it, right? College Game Day is going to be in Baton Rouge. Y'all know I like my accents. Clemson at LSU. ESPN's already announced it. It isn't just the first show of the season. This is the 500th College Game Day Roadshow. So, for that 500th show, ESPN didn't want to do a week 0 game. They wanted a big-time atmosphere, and Baton Rouge obviously checks that box, right? Like the last time the game day went to LSU for a regular season home game was November 9th of 2024, and that was the Alabama-LSU game in Kalen DeBoer's first season. This time you got Clemson coming into Death Valley. You got LSU starting the season ranked around the edge of the top 10. You got 2 huge national brands, and you got ESPN and ABC being able to build basically the entire Saturday around this game. The other games that I would have looked at, maybe Boise State, Oregon, maybe Baylor, Auburn on that one. East Carolina, Alabama is going to be an 11 a.m. game. UCLA, Cal is interesting. That's a late night game. None of those were going to beat Clemson, LSU once they decided to make it the 500th Roadshow, right? So this one's locked in, already confirmed, Clemson at LSU. Now, for week 2, this is another one that is already official. Ohio State at Texas, this one in Austin, right? Last time game day was in Austin was also in 2024. That was when Georgia came to town, and this one's obvious, right? Ohio State starts the season ranked number 1 in the AP poll. Texas starts number 5. It's 2 of the biggest brands in the sport. They're both legitimate national title contenders, and we've already got recent history between them, right? In 2024, they played in the playoff. 2025, they played in Columbus. This year, they're playing in Austin. So, third game of a 3-game stretch. Ohio State got the first 2. Let's see if Texas can match it up. And the other options this week are pretty good. Oklahoma at Michigan typically would get this any other time. You got Arizona State and Texas A&M. Like, you got Memphis and Boise State. Oregon, Oklahoma State could be interesting based on the new coach at Oklahoma State, but none of those are Ohio State, Texas. And this is another kind of reminder that ESPN not owning the Big Ten doesn't mean Game Day is going to ignore the Big Ten, but it does help when a Big Ten team is playing against a big-time SEC team and ESPN is televising it. So, week 2, Ohio State at Texas. That one is also already confirmed. Week 3, and now we get to our first actual prediction. But this one's pretty easy too, and it might be my favorite one on the entire board, right? LSU at Ole Miss. Game Day goes to Oxford. Last time College Game Day went to Oxford was in 2021, and that was Texas A&M at Ole Miss. So we're talking about a 5-year drought here. Everybody remembers 2014 or 2013, whatever it was, when Alabama went to Oxford. They hosted Game Day for the first time. Katy Perry was there. It was this huge thing. Ole Miss upset Alabama. But with this one, I mean, you got a storyline. Like, it doesn't matter if these two teams are undefeated or not. Lane Kiffin returns to Oxford as the head coach at LSU. I mean, come on. You could plan 3 hours of television around that storyline without even talking about the actual football game. Like, Ole Miss fans, Kiffin going back to the Grove. Like, they won't do it, but could you imagine what it would look like if Kiffin were to be on set for I mean, they already have a net around the stage. I mean, the signs that they're going to have, the interviews, everything surrounding how he left Ole Miss and ended up down in Baton Rouge. And the football game itself should be really good. I mean, Ole Miss is at number 9 in the AP poll. LSU is at number 11. So there's a very real possibility that this is a top 10 or at least a top 15 matchup in week 3. The alternatives this week, Florida State at Alabama, revenge game for Bama. SMU at Louisville is interesting because that could decide who's going to face Miami in the ACC championship game. And then Florida at Auburn, 2 first-year head coaches. I mean, those are all good. But if LSU and Ole Miss are both undefeated, I don't think this is particularly close. Even if they're not undefeated, I think week 3 LSU at Ole Miss is where game day is going to be. Now, for week 4, I changed this one after looking more closely at the whole season, right? Now, originally, I had Oklahoma at Georgia. But I'm going to switch it up a little bit because I think game day is going to go to LA for Oregon and USC. And the stat that makes this prediction really interesting is that the last time that USC hosted College Game Day was October 29th of 2011. That was Stanford at USC. That is 15 years ago. And now you got preseason number 2 Oregon coming into the Coliseum to play who is currently preseason number 14 USC. But the schedules are set up to where they both should take care of business early. You could realistically be looking at like number 2 Oregon and number 8 USC, something like that. Like you've got a huge Big Ten game. You got Los Angeles, you got the Coliseum, and you got the storyline that game day hadn't been there for a USC home game in 15 years. That's insanely attractive. Like more storylines about Lincoln Riley. This is kind of the make or break year at USC. Like there's plenty there. The alternatives are fantastic, right? Texas at Tennessee, Texas A&M at LSU, Oklahoma at Georgia. Those are all games, and honestly, they might all end up being better football games. But, and ESPN does own the rights on all of them, so it wouldn't surprise me if they go that way. But Oregon-USC feels like the better event, the better storyline. So I'm going to predict that in Week 4, game day goes at USC for the Oregon game. Now, for Week 5, this one's a little more dependent on what else happens in September. I'm going to say I've got Miami at Clemson. Last time game day visited Clemson was October 1st of 2022, and that was NC State at Clemson. So it's another campus ESPN has not visited in a while. Miami starts at number 7 in the polls. Clemson starts just outside the AP Top 25. They are number 23 in the coaches poll. So the question here is going to be Clemson. If they get through the LSU game without being completely demolished, and they get to October with only 1 loss, this becomes potentially the biggest game in the ACC to that point. outside of maybe SMU, Louisville, like this could end up being a conference championship preview. Like it could have major playoff implications. And ESPN gets to show Death Valley at Clemson without having to go back to another SEC campus and hearing all about the SEC bias and all that kind of stuff, right? The other options that weekend are really good. Like Washington at USC could end up being a better football game. Ohio State at Iowa, Auburn at Tennessee. You know, if TCU starts out hot, you get BYU in there. That could be interesting. If Clemson struggles early, like this prediction could absolutely change. But preseason, I'm going to take Miami and Clemson because I think that they want to be able to show Miami, and Miami's first real deal test of the season could be this spot. So I'm going to take Miami at Clemson.
Are you tired of sore knees or joints slowing you down? Go Sleeves uses built-in kinesiology tape technology to give you support, reduce pain, and help you recover faster. Use code WCE for 15% off over at GoSleeves.com.
You want extra Winning Cures Everything content and a way to support the show directly? Head over to buymeacoffee.com/winningcures and become part of the community today. Now, for Week 6, we're not going to overthink this. Georgia at Alabama in Tuscaloosa. Like, game day's been to Tuscaloosa basically every year since Saban started. I mean, like, it's basically a yearly trek down to T-Town. But last year they were there for the Vanderbilt game. Probably could have been there for other games, but surprising it was the Vanderbilt game. But that was a revenge spot, so there were storylines around that as well. This is Georgia, Alabama. Georgia starts number 3. Bama started number 13 in the AP poll. If Alabama is good, and there's a very real chance this is a top 10 matchup by the time we get there, because Alabama's schedule is not easy, but one of the easier in the SEC to that point. But you've got SEC championship implications all over this. You got playoff implications. You got two of the biggest programs of the last 15 years, and ESPN owns the game. Right? Now, the alternatives, could they absolutely be at Texas and Oklahoma and Dallas? Absolutely. Red River, you better believe it. USC at Penn State? Yes. Iowa at Washington, sneaky good ball game, and at that point, Iowa could be undefeated or close to it. Yeah, probably close to it because they're hosting Ohio State before that. But, yeah, I mean, Red River's obviously the biggest threat, but Georgia, Alabama, and Tuscaloosa, I think this one's just too easy. So Week 6, Georgia at Alabama. Now, Week 7, we got another Big Ten game where I don't think anybody cares who owns the television rights. Ohio State at Indiana. Last time that game day was in Bloomington was in 2024 for the Washington game. And remember the context here, right? Indiana is the defending national champion. Their early schedule is super friggin' easy. They start number 6 in the AP poll. Ohio State starts number 1. There is a very legitimate scenario where we get to October 17th, and this is still number 1 Ohio State at number 3 Indiana, something like that, or number 2 against number 5, or something like that. And if that's what we got, ESPN is going there. Now, the other candidates are all games that ESPN owns. Notre Dame at BYU, very interesting, probably the biggest game in Provo in I don't even know how long. Alabama at Tennessee, always a huge rivalry game. Auburn at Georgia, depends on what Auburn does to that point. But Alabama at Tennessee is a fantastic ESPN-owned game. Notre Dame BYU could be huge, but the defending national champ hosting preseason number 1 with revenge on their minds, that's a better national story. So Week 7, I'm predicting Ohio State at Indiana. Now, for Week 8, we are intentionally repeating a campus. And it's the one that's at the top here. I'll just go on to say it's Ole Miss at Texas. Game day will have already been in Austin in Week 2 for Ohio State, Texas. So if our predictions are right, this would be the most recent game day appearance at Texas. Yeah, Week 2 would. But 6 weeks will have passed. And as far as preseason goes, we're looking at number 9 Ole Miss against number 5 Texas. Both teams top 10. Ole Miss has got some tough games between now and then. but this is the best quarterback matchup in the SEC, maybe in the country at that point. And I think ESPN goes back to Austin for this because now you've got a massive SEC game with playoff implications, SEC title implications. ESPN actually owns the property. And the other options are all really good, right? A&M at Alabama, Indiana at Michigan. You know, who else really tickles your fancy at that point? If South Carolina starts hot, maybe Tennessee at South Carolina. Houston at Utah. Maybe if Houston were to pull off the upset over Texas Tech early in the year. Yeah. I mean, Indiana, Michigan could become really interesting. But if Ole Miss and Texas is a legit top 10 matchup, I think ESPN is going to go to the game that they own. And when you look at the Manning history there, because Arch Manning plays for Texas, but his uncle and his granddad both played for Ole Miss. There's a Manning Avenue or whatever or in Oxford. I mean, the storylines are endless. So I think that's where they end up for week number 8. Now for week number 9, this is my biggest gamble. I'm going Georgia and Florida in Atlanta. Now there's obviously no previous game day appearance, or at least not regular season game day appearance. Well, I guess if you start looking at neutral site early season games, maybe something like that. But regardless, this is a neutral site game. You have never had Georgia, Florida in Atlanta, at least not in modern times. I don't remember or know if they did it back whenever. But the reason I'm picking this is because 2026 gives us something that's a little different, right? ESPN gets to take one of the biggest rivalries in the SEC and sell a unique version of it. The problem is that Florida's got to cooperate. Like, Georgia starts number 3 in the AP poll. Florida is not ranked. If Florida gets to this game at, 6-2 and ranked somewhere inside the top 20, then I love this prediction. If Florida's 4-4, go ahead and forget everything that I have already said. The other options, though, are Ohio State at USC, which, in my predictions, they will have already been there at USC in week 4. Auburn at Ole Miss. If they just went to Ole Miss, Texas last week, you don't want to do the same team 2 weeks in a row. And then Arizona State at BYU is interesting, but I mean, can you get really excited about Arizona State right now? I don't know. You could go to Ohio State and USC, but we're trying to not make this entire game day season about Ohio State. So in the preseason, I'm taking this unique Atlanta edition of Georgia, Florida for week number 9. All right, for week 10, this is another change that I made that I think makes more sense. I think they're going to go to South Bend for Miami at Notre Dame. At this point, these are 2 teams whose schedules set them up to be undefeated by this point. This will be in November. The last time game day was in South Bend was in December of 2024 against Indiana for the playoff game. That was on a Friday, right? Preseason, Miami's number 7, Notre Dame's number 4. It's already a potential top 10 game before anybody's played a snap. You've got 2 enormous brands. You got history between these programs, the Catholics and the Convicts, you guys know. And then obviously the playoff implications are huge. Not to mention, Miami has not played at Notre Dame since 2016. This week is the most full week. The alternatives for this week are ridiculous. Oregon at Ohio State, that is number 2 at number 1 in the current preseason poll. Georgia at Ole Miss is huge. BYU at Utah. Alabama at LSU. Penn State at Washington could be massive. So this prediction is not safe, but again, part of this exercise is predicting what game day's entire season looks like, not just blindly taking Ohio State games every time they're in a huge game, because they got 5 or 6 of them this year. So Miami Notre Dame gives ESPN a huge national game, an iconic location, and a completely different feel from what they've already had. So in week 10, we're doing Catholics, Convicts, Miami at Notre Dame. Shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. The latest WCE merch is now available. Support and rep your favorite college football show today. Just visit winningcuresEverything.com/store. If you can't watch the show live, no problem. Subscribe to the Winning Cures Everything audio podcast and never miss an episode. Of course, make sure that you leave a 5-star review, and don't forget, it's available everywhere you get podcasts. Now, week 11, I mean, this was hard. This was really difficult to figure out. Because, and I'll go on and tell you, at this point in the season, they will have already had a game, 2 games at Texas. They will have had a game at LSU and a game where LSU visits Ole Miss. But I'm going to say that they will go to Texas at LSU. We're going back to Baton Rouge. If our week 1 prediction, but it's not even a prediction, it's confirmed already. If that plays out, the last game day appearance at LSU would be Clemson LSU earlier this season. So we're repeating Baton Rouge here. But at this point, there's more than 2 months between the 2 appearances. And as far as the preseason rankings are concerned, you got number 5 against number 11 here. If Kiffin has LSU in the playoff hunt and Texas is anywhere near expectations, this is probably going to be the biggest game of November. And it'll be a primetime game, night game in Death Valley, Texas with Arch Manning, all of the hoopla around them. That's going to be huge. Now, the alternatives, Michigan at Oregon, Ole Miss at Oklahoma, USC at Indiana. Like, it is a loaded week. Michigan, Oregon could steal it. USC, Indiana could steal it. But if Texas LSU is something like, if it's any kind of a top 10 matchup, ESPN already owns it. It's in Death Valley. They can count on an audience there. It's got SEC championship implications. I would go back to Baton Rouge. So week 11, Texas at LSU. Now, only 2 weeks left. Let's look at week 12. And this one, I could look really smart by November, right? Texas A&M at Oklahoma in Norman. Last regular season game day visit to Norman was last year for the Michigan-Oklahoma game. And look at where these teams start, right? Texas A&M is number 8, Oklahoma number 10. Both of them a little lower than expected win totals based on the schedules that they are. But we're projecting game day for a game that is already a preseason top 10 matchup. Now, obviously, a million things can happen between August and November. But if Oklahoma and A&M both get here at 8-2, something like that, this could become a college football playoff or elimination game. And, you know, an SEC title elimination game. Now, your other choices are pretty big as well. LSU at Tennessee, Indiana at Washington, SMU at Notre Dame. Very interesting, but Texas A&M Oklahoma gives ESPN a potentially enormous SEC game at a campus that we haven't used yet in 2026, which I think is going to be pretty important at this point. So, A&M at Oklahoma for week number 12. Now, for week 13, finally, rivalry week. This one is interesting, right? Very interesting. And this is difficult when you think about it, because how about this? I'm going to tell you, we're going to Eugene, Washington at Oregon. The last game day appearance in Eugene was November 22nd last year. Now, Oregon did host game day twice in 2025, the Indiana game and the USC game, both one in October, one in November. For the majority of the season, there could have been some Oregon fatigue here, but at this point, we have not been to Eugene. We've been to one Oregon game, and that was at USC early in the season. Oregon starts number 2 in the country. If Lanning's team is 11-0, 10-1 going into this game, Oregon could be playing for a Big Ten championship berth, a playoff bye, maybe the number 1 seed in the CFP. And Washington-Oregon has become a pretty good rivalry, right? It's a pretty nasty rivalry. Washington beat Oregon twice during that 2023 run to the national title game. Oregon has answered since then, but there is legitimate bad blood here. Like, the other choices are all really good. It's rivalry weekend. You can come up with all kind of stuff. That's what makes this one so difficult. Michigan at Ohio State. Auburn at Alabama. South Carolina at Clemson. If UCLA is pretty good, and USC has done well this year, USC at UCLA. You know, those are all good Saturday games. There's a lot of really good Friday games as well. Texas at Texas A&M, Mississippi State at Ole Miss, The Egg Bowl there, Minnesota at Wisconsin, Nebraska, Iowa, Florida, Florida State. Those are all good games on Friday, but they cannot host game day if they're Friday games. Now, let's be clear. If Washington is 6-5 and Michigan is in the top 15 and Ohio State's in the top 10, game day is going to go to Columbus. And I'm not arguing otherwise because that's the biggest college football game of the season in the regular season. Like there's even Texas Ohio State cannot match the numbers that the game does. But this is a preseason prediction. And if Washington can be a ranked team, 8-3, maybe 9-2, while Oregon is competing for a national championship, I think Eugene becomes really attractive for college game day to finish the regular season. Especially because we've already used Ohio State twice. There's Ohio State fatigue at this point. So I am predicting that they're going to go Washington at Oregon. So that's the board. Let's go on and recap it. Week 1, Clemson at LSU. Week 2, Ohio State at Texas. Week 3, LSU at Ole Miss. Week 4, Oregon at USC. Week 5, Miami at Clemson. Week 6, Georgia at Alabama. Week 7, Ohio State at Indiana. Week 8, Ole Miss at Texas. Week 9, Georgia, Florida in Atlanta. Week 10, Miami at Notre Dame. Week 11, Texas at LSU. Week 12, Texas A&M at Oklahoma. And Week 13, Washington at Oregon. The ones I feel best about after the two that have already been announced, LSU at Ole Miss in Week 3. Like Lane Kiffin returning to Oxford just feels like a game day producer's dream. Georgia at Alabama in Week 6. Unless one of those teams just completely falls apart, I have a hard time seeing ESPN going anywhere else. And Ohio State at Indiana in Week 7. If Indiana looks anything like the defending national champs and Ohio State looks anything like the preseason number 1 team, that is an enormous game regardless of TV rights. Now, the ones that I'm watching, that I'm going to keep my eye on, Week 5, Miami at Clemson. Week 8, Ole Miss at Texas. Week 9, Georgia and Florida. And rivalry week, Washington at Oregon. Especially Week 9, right? Like, Florida has to make Georgia-Florida matter. Like, and rivalry week, like, that pick really comes down to Washington. If Washington is ranked and Oregon's chasing the national title, give me that one. If Washington ain't very good, then, yeah, we're probably going to Columbus. Again, like they have done every year for forever, it feels like. But this is what makes predicting game day in August fun. Like, we're not just predicting which games are going to be good. We're predicting which teams will be good enough to turn these games into actual events. And game day isn't really picking games. They're picking events. The biggest crowd, the best story, the right atmosphere, the game everybody wakes up Saturday morning wanting to talk about. So, at this point, now, I want to know where I'm wrong. Like, tell me which one of these destinations do you think has absolutely zero chance? Which game did I leave off that you think game day is guaranteed to visit? Go ahead and drop those in the comments. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Of course, like the video. You guys know with the thumbs up, all that. And we'll come back to this thing during the season and find out just exactly how badly I screwed it up. For now, though, take care of yourself. Take care of each other. God bless college football. And hopefully all of your tickets cash this week.
Thanks for listening to Winning Cures Everything. Subscribe, leave a review or comment, follow at GaryWCE on X, and check out the web store,